In the distant future, Earth can no longer sustain its large human population. As a result, humanity is forced to leave the overburdened planet and explore the universe, eventually discovering a new solar system. This solar system contains dozens of planets and hundreds of moons. After decades of effort, humanity successfully terraformed the planets here, transforming them into new Earths suitable for human life. They also established a human alliance at the center of the system. However, on the planets at the edges of the system, some human colonies refused to join the alliance and declared themselves independent. But the alliance, under the pretext of making the universe safer, launched a war against these independent planets. One day, during a class, a girl expressed an opinion that differed from her teacher's. To her surprise, the next moment, the teacher sent her to a lab. It turns out that this girl possesses intelligence far beyond normal human levels, and Alliance scientists have been treating her as an experiment, planning to develop her into an extraordinarily powerful killing machine. That day, a man dressed in a military officer's uniform walked in. After inquiring about the girl's condition with the researchers, he suddenly slammed something on the ground. The shockwave from the device instantly knocked everyone unconscious. This man was Simon, and he had come to rescue his sister, River. Just as Simon was about to take his sister and leave, River, like a prophet, foresaw what was about to happen. When two staff members passed by, she had already climbed to the ceiling to hide. Later, they opened a window and planned to escape through the ventilation shaft. Simon's small ship, which he had prepared in advance, appeared right on time and lowered a rescue ladder. But just then, two security guards caught up to them, and below, laser weapons were slowly closing in on them. At this critical moment, they successfully got on the rescue ladder. Their escape caused significant concern within the Alliance. The Alliance dispatched the operative to investigate the matter. The operative discovered that the chief doctor had violated regulations by allowing an Alliance officer into the lab. This raised concerns that the top-secret nature of the human experimentation might be exposed. As an official envoy of the Alliance, the operative had the authority to act first and report later. After swiftly dispatching two bodyguards, he used a precise nerve strike on the doctor. Then he calmly placed a sword in front of the doctor, waiting for the doctor to impale himself on it. Meanwhile, Simon had already boarded the Serenity, a space transport ship, with his sister, River. As the ship accelerated and passed through the atmosphere of a planet, a piece of the ship's stabilizer suddenly broke off. After checking on the situation, Mal, the ship's captain, calmly reassured the other passengers over the intercom, telling them not to panic. They had Wash, an experienced and highly skilled pilot. After a rough bout of turbulence, the ship safely landed on the planet. Simon then approached Mal, asking him not to involve his sister in any future missions. At this point, it had been 6 months since Simon had escaped from the Alliance with River. Mal, once a captain in the 57th Brigade of the Independent Army that resisted the Alliance, had lost in the war. Afterward, he bought the old Serenity transport ship, and along with a few of his former comrades, engaged in illegal salvage operations in space. But ever since taking on Simon's risky deal, they had been constantly on the run from the Alliance for months, with no time for other jobs. Fortunately, Mal had discovered that River had the ability to foresee the future, so this time he planned to use her for a big heist. They intended to rob a security company secretly funded by the Alliance. Driving a hover car, they quickly arrived at the target location. As soon as they pushed open the door of the security company, Zoe shot out a surveillance camera in the corner. The crew easily overpowered all the employees inside. At that moment, a man tried to draw his gun in resistance, but Zoe pressed a gun to the back of his head before he could act. It turned out that River had already predicted his move. The man reluctantly threw his gun aside. Mal forced the security company's manager to open the vault, but there was only a small amount of cash inside. Mal wasn't fooled by the deception. He reached into the vault, triggering a hidden door that opened beneath his feet. Mal shouted into the vault, telling the guards inside that he was going to clean up the entire vault. However, the guards inside responded that they needed to give him the authorization code. Mal's teammate then aimed, and the guards quickly surrendered without further resistance. Just then, River had another premonition of danger. Sure enough, two ships appeared outside, and descending from them were the terrifying Reavers, the cannibalistic marauders feared throughout the galaxy. Mal quickly ordered the crew to retreat in their hovercar. One of the security company employees ran after them, pleading for Mal to take him along, but the car was already full, and overloading it would put everyone at risk. Mal had no choice but to push the man out of the car. The next second, the man was seized by the Reavers, and Mal had no choice but to shoot him in the head. Seeing the man was dead, the Reavers discarded his body. These mutated humans fed on the organs of the living, and Mal's shot was the greatest mercy he could give the man. They sped away in their hovercar, with a Reaver ship chasing closely behind them. They quickly realized the Reavers weren't trying to kill them outright, they wanted to shoot them down and devour them alive. Zoe urgently radioed Wash for support. Wash immediately fired up Serenity and raced to their location. Meanwhile, one of the crew members was hit in the leg by a Reaver's shot and nearly fell out of the car. He begged Mal, saying that if the Reavers caught him, Mal should kill him first. But Mal wasn't about to give up on his teammates so easily. Firing several shots, Mal finally severed the rope that was dragging the crew member, saving his life. However, the Reaver ship was closing in fast. At that moment, Zoe deliberately crashed into a large rock, sending it flying. The rock struck the Reaver ship's engine, seemingly putting them out of danger. The crew thought they were safe, but then the smoking Reaver ship reappeared. Zoe accelerated, making a sharp 180-degree turn, ready for a last-ditch collision. Just as they were about to crash, Serenity swooped down from the sky, and the crew managed to jump into the cargo hold. The Reaver ship, unable to stop in time, was split in half as it crashed into Serenity. Simon quickly hit the button to close the cargo bay doors. Suddenly, a Reaver stood up behind Mal, but the crew acted quickly, taking him down with a single shot. Finally, they were safe, and, miraculously, they had completed the heist with no casualties and a bag full of cash. Next, they needed to head to another planet to pay the informant who had provided the tip for the job. Mal and his crew piloted Serenity to Beaumont, where they were set to meet the twin brothers who had given them the lead on their previous mission. Mal also saw this as the perfect opportunity to get Simon and River off the ship for good. However, River had followed them into the bar and became mesmerized by an animated cartoon playing on the wall. As she was watching intently, she suddenly heard strange sounds and began to mutter. Then, without warning, she launched into a violent attack, striking everyone in the bar indiscriminately. Mal stood there in shock. After more than 8 months with them, the seemingly harmless young girl had suddenly revealed incredible combat skills. One of the crew tried to restrain her, but River effortlessly struck him in a vital spot, leaving him incapacitated. Seeing that River was completely out of control, Mal drew his gun, but almost at the same time, River turned her gun on him. Luckily, her brother Simon rushed in just in time and shouted a code word, which immediately caused River to collapse. Unconscious, Mal had no choice but to carry her back to Serenity and lock her up in chains. Everything that just happened was seen by the operative, who had been sent by the Alliance to hunt down River. He quickly identified Mal's information through the surveillance monitors. At this moment, Mal was scolding Simon, questioning why he hadn't told him the truth. It turns out that, like other test subjects, the Alliance had turned River into a killing machine. They implanted an activation command inside her body. However, the person who helped Simon rescue his sister only gave him the shutdown code. Simon didn't know what the activation command was, so Wash suggested they go to an old friend for help. This guy, nicknamed Mr. Universe, was a highly skilled hacker. He quickly hacked into the Alliance's surveillance network and discovered that just before River transformed, she had seen a cartoon. Further investigation revealed that this cartoon contained a hidden trigger command. It turned out that the operative had broadcasted this trigger-laden cartoon across the universe through the network, intending to cause a disturbance with her and then track her location. Once Mal learned the situation, he immediately took River and the crew on another escape journey. This time, they arrived at another planet called Haven, planning to hide out at the old shepherd's home for a while. The next morning, Mal received a video call from Inara. She said she had gotten into trouble with some locals and hoped Mal could come help her. Mal instantly saw through her lie. She was likely coerced into making the call. Even though Mal knew this might be a trap, he still agreed readily. Knowing full well there's danger, he still decided to walk straight into the lion's den. He needed to figure out who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Soon they arrived here. At this time, Inara was at a companion's temple, lighting incense and praying. Mal, disguised as a woman, appeared beside her. She was very surprised. She had deliberately left clues in the video call, so why hadn't he noticed? At that moment, the operative pushed the door open and entered. He first spoke diplomatically, saying he admired Mal's bravery for coming alone to save his Inara. Then, he urged Mal to hand over River voluntarily, telling him that as soon as Serenity entered the planet's atmosphere, their battleship had already locked onto Serenity's pulse beacon. If he refused to hand over River, a missile would be launched, destroying Serenity. The next second, Mal pulled the pulse beacon out of his pocket and tossed it to the operative. Seeing that the threat was gone, the operative had no choice but to suggest resolving the issue in a more civilized manner. Unexpectedly, Mal immediately shot him. However, the operative wasn't unprepared. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. What followed was a brutal beating for Mal at the operative's hands, and even the woman wasn't spared. Just as the operative was about to use his sword to finish them off, a flash grenade hidden in the incense burner suddenly detonated. By the time the operative's soldiers arrived, Mal had already taken his Inara and flown back to Serenity in a small shuttle. To evade the operative's pursuit, they released 7 decoy devices containing tracking signals to confuse him. Upon hearing this, the operative stood there, stunned. Meanwhile, aboard Serenity, one of the crew members grew increasingly angry, planning to kill River to rid themselves of this enormous trouble once and for all. But River had already foreseen everything. When the crewmate entered the room with a gun, she had already climbed onto the ceiling. Then, everyone heard a dull thud. They rushed over to find the crewmate lying on the ground. The hatch had been locked from the inside, and they couldn't open it. Thinking River had escaped, they turned to chase after her. However, Simon hesitated, and just a second later, his sister appeared right in front of him. Before Simon could even speak after opening the door, River knocked him unconscious with a single punch. Finally, Mal found River in the cockpit. He quietly approached her from behind, but without turning her head. River pointed a gun at him, knowing he wasn't her match. Mal immediately put his gun away. It turned out that recently, River had been experiencing flashes of another person's memories in her mind. Something terrible had happened on a planet called Miranda. She wanted to go to this planet to uncover the truth. However, they couldn't find any information on Miranda in the database. Even Mal, a seasoned veteran, had only heard of the planet in passing from the older generation. Apparently, previous attempts to terraform the planet had failed, and all the settlers had died. It was clear the Alliance had destroyed the records, deliberately covering something up. At that moment, Inara stepped forward and revealed that she knew Miranda's exact location. It was on the edge of the Bohemia quadrant, but in order to reach Miranda, they would have to pass through a dead zone, a region controlled by the Reavers, and even the Alliance warships dared not venture there. As they discussed this, they arrived back at Haven, where the Shepherd resided, but the place had already been ravaged by war, bodies littering the ground. Even children hadn't been spared. They searched everywhere for the Shepherd and finally found him, barely alive, beside a fortification. Mal quickly called for the doctor, but it was too late. They couldn't save him in time. The Shepherd told Mal to always hold on to his faith, and then he passed away forever. Zoe quickly instructed the crew to warn everyone they had recently been in contact with, telling them to flee immediately, but it was too late. The ruthless operative had already killed everyone they had come into contact with. He also warned Mal that the killing wouldn't stop unless he handed over River, but Mal, being who he was, hung up the call and immediately made a bold decision. He ordered the crew to gather up the bodies, tying 5 or 6 together in groups and securing them to the outside of the ship with ropes. Meanwhile, Mal went looking for red paint. Only Zoe saw through Mal's intentions with this plan. It turned out he was planning to disguise Serenity as a Reaver ship to pass through the dead zone. The others thought Mal must have lost his mind, but Mal had made up his mind. He was going to take a gamble, hoping they might find something on Miranda that could get them out of their current predicament. So, after modifying the ship, they went ahead with this crazy plan. A spacecraft, its bow covered with bodies and its hull painted red, sailed through the dead zone. This was Reaver territory. The crew stood silently, afraid to make even the slightest sound. Fortunately, they made it through without incident. Heading toward their destination Miranda, the operative completely lost all signals of Serenity. Through their instruments, they detected that this planet's oceans and land had no signs of earthquakes, radiation, gravity, or air issues. Everything seemed very similar to Earth. Everything appeared normal. However, despite the presence of numerous high-tech buildings, they found no functioning power systems, and the entire city was eerily silent. They detected only a faint electromagnetic signal, so they cautiously moved forward, discovering the city was full of mummified corpses. There were no external injuries or signs of fractures, and the expressions on the faces of the dead were oddly peaceful. As everyone began feeling chills up their spines, a Chinese broadcast suddenly played overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, please be advised." Suddenly, River heard the sound of a monster growling behind her, but when she turned around, there was nothing there. It seemed as though she remembered something, and she appeared deeply disturbed. Following the source of the signal, they found a crashed ship. Inside the wreckage, River walked straight to a projector. Once she installed the storage device, a shocking secret, hidden for 12 years, was finally brought to light. It turned out that the Alliance had secretly conducted something called the PAX Project, developing a biochemical weapon designed to control the human mind. The weapon could destroy a person's will to fight, making them as docile as sheep. The Alliance intended to use this weapon to control the independent planets that refused to join the Alliance, but when they deployed the biochemical weapon on the planet Miranda, something unexpected happened. While 90% of the population gave up fighting, they also stopped all other activities. They chose to do nothing until they slowly died. Even more terrifying, the remaining 10% of the population underwent the opposite change. They became more violent and aggressive, eventually transforming into the flesh-eating Reavers. That's when it dawned on them the Alliance had created these horrific Reavers. The Alliance feared that once River's memories resurfaced, she would reveal these secrets, which is why they've been hunting her. In order to expose the Alliance's ugly truth, Mal planned to broadcast the footage to the entire universe. He thought of his old friend Mr. Universe, and once again they set out aboard Serenity. They contacted Mr. Universe, asking for his help, and he readily agreed, but they were unaware that the operative had already surrounded the place, and he killed Mr. Universe by impaling him with a sword. The operative then gathered all the Alliance's warships, planning to capture Mal and his crew in one fell swoop when they passed through the dead zone. However, they forgot that River had the ability to foresee the future. As Serenity was about to pass through the dead zone, Mal seized the moment and fired at the Reaver ships, shooting once and then quickly retreating. By this time, the operative was leading dozens of space warships, waiting at the border for Serenity to walk right into their trap. Soon, Serenity appeared. The operative sneered at how Mal hadn't changed course, unaware that he was the real fool. Just as he gave the order to prepare for attack, a massive fleet of Reaver ships suddenly emerged behind Serenity. The operative was stunned by the sight. Completely caught off guard, he hurriedly ordered his forces to aim all their cannons at the Reavers, and an intense interstellar battle ensued. The Serenity maneuvered skillfully amidst intense gunfire, narrowly avoiding a small grenade hit, but thankfully sustaining minimal damage. They managed to escape the battlefield unscathed, heading towards the planet where Mr. Universe resided. However, just as they were about to reach their destination, a Marauder ship fired an electromagnetic pulse at the Serenity, hitting it and causing the ship to lose power and go out of control. Quickly securing themselves with seatbelts, they braced for the ship's descent to the ground. As the ship was on the verge of crashing, Wash finally activated the backup power, allowing for a safe landing. Just when everyone thought they were safe, Wash suddenly came under attack by the Marauders. Zoe attempted to rescue him, but with the Marauders launching another assault, the crew had no choice but to flee into an underground tunnel. Discovering that the narrow passage was well defended with secure doors at both ends, they fortified their position by moving a large crate to block the entrance. Meanwhile, Mal ventured alone to find Mr. Universe, only to discover that the place had already been attacked and his old friend lay dead in the arms of his robot girlfriend. In a surprising turn of events, the robot girlfriend spoke, revealing that although the operative had destroyed Mal's ship, he had a backup vessel underground. Upon hearing this, Mal hurried to the underground location. As he was about to descend using a cable in the middle of the room, the operative suddenly shot him from behind. It turned out that after his ship was hit by the Marauder vessel, the operative managed to escape in a small craft and followed the Serenity to this location. Upon entering Mr. Universe's room, he overheard the conversation with the robot girlfriend. Subsequently, the two engaged in a fierce life-and-death struggle, with the operative clearly having the upper hand as Mal struggled to defend himself. Despite the operative's initial dominance, Mal landed a punch on his throat, followed by a joint lock that rendered the operative immobile. Mal, choosing not to kill him, intended to make him witness the Alliance's actions firsthand. He then played a video recording on the monitor, displaying the atrocities committed by the Alliance. On the other side, the teammates were fighting desperately to resist the Marauders' assault. They quickly broke through the door, with Zoe unfortunately sustaining a serious injury. Wash and Kaylee were both shot and fell to the ground. As more Marauders poured in, they had no choice but to retreat. However, just as things seemed dire, the damn door malfunctioned at the worst possible moment. Wash had to throw a final grenade to buy them a brief respite. With Kaylee on the brink of succumbing to the poison dart, Simon intended to retrieve his kit to treat her, but as Simon rose, witnessing his beloved brother being shot and falling, River, deeply affected, unexpectedly unlocked her latent abilities. Her gaze became resolute as she swiftly ran outside. She then single-handedly took on a group of armed marauders, skillfully hitting the switch to close the door. In the instant before the door shut, she tossed back her brother's kit. By the time Mal returned from below ground, River had eliminated all the marauders on her own. However, a hole suddenly exploded behind her, revealing that the operative's larger force had arrived. The soldiers ordered everyone to drop their weapons and radioed the operative. Witnessing the Alliance's atrocities firsthand, the operative chose to stand on the side of justice. He ordered his soldiers to stand down, halting the attack. Not only did he let Mal and his crew go, but he also declared that they would no longer work for the Alliance. In the movie's conclusion, the Serenity flew off into space, embarking on a new journey. I am a movie enthusiast. Until next time.